Welcome to Overtime the Podcast, a show dedicated to all things watches, with a special love for microbrands and their affordable range. I'm your host Praka, and some of you might know me as Kinda Average Watches. Join me as we explore new releases, share tips on building your collection, and put in some overtime with hands-on reviews of the latest watches. Whether you're a bit of a pro or you're just getting into the hobby, this podcast will keep you entertained with great stories from the people in the industry, casual conversations, and guest hosts who bring their own unique perspectives. Let's get started. Hello folks, how's it going? Hope everyone's doing well. So this episode is a special two-part episode. So I thought I'll do a bit of a introduction before we get into the recording itself. So this one was a episode that we recorded from the gang from RZE. So RZE, I think they're pretty popular, I would say, in this microbrand and independent and affordable space. So they're a Singaporean-based microbrand with a global footprint. So I was joined by Andrew, the community manager, and Huiy, the co-founder slash head of global marketing. Listen on to hear more about their titles and why sometimes it doesn't really matter. They're just a gang working together to make the brand a success. So we discuss RZE, of course, themselves, the roots, famous UltraHex coding, the lineup, any upcoming models, and other fun things. So it was a great chat. I really enjoyed it. So much so that we carried on for over the normal episode length. So I split it up into a two-part episode. So without further ado, enjoy part one. Cheers. Welcome to Overtime the Podcast, proudly sponsored by Watchpoint. All right, today we have two gentlemen joining the podcast from RZE Watches. So RZE Watches, look, it's a fantastic micro brand that's headquarters in Singapore. And this is a micro brand that I've heard about ever since I really started sort of getting into the micro brand slash affordable space. So I'm super excited to have these guys on my podcast. So hey, welcome to the podcast, Huiy and Andrew. How you guys going?
Hey there, how's it going? Thanks for having us on the podcast. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, good afternoon or good evening to you guys over there in Australia. And just yeah, good morning and thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you so much for making it happen. So we're actually recording in three different time zones at the moment. So it's pretty awesome that we can we can make it work. So I really appreciate your guys' times. So look, before we sort of crack on with the episode and find out who you are and find out more about the brand, etc. Of course, I always kick off with a wrist check. So what do you guys got on your wrists? I'll start off with yourself, Andrew.
So I have the Urbanist on my wrist. Yeah, it's my pride and joy because I was the one that kind of worked on the campaign for the launch and all that. And yeah, solo watch is something that I really love because it's grab and go. Like it's simple. Like yeah. So yeah,
That's awesome.
lightweight, easy, small. Yeah.
Awesome, fantastic little watches. Always had my eye on them since they've come out. So awesome, awesome. And yourself, Hoy?
Yeah, and here on my wrist I have the UTD 8000. I have the navy blue one here, but this one's actually unique in that it's one of our original prototypes. So this one's been around the world, been at shows, been banged on with the mallet, dropped, run over. This is one of the few that had that opportunity to be in our testing. So yeah, it's an important piece to us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And we'll get into the UTD 8000 a little while. Yeah, want to sort of into the episode. But yeah, I loved all those testing videos. I mean, those drop videos were fantastic, fantastic. All right, so I guess I'll wrap it up with my wrist check. I'm wearing a Seiko. I'm wearing a Seiko SKXA 35, which is the yellow dial, and it's the elusive Singapore dial edition. So it has the watch movement and the dial was made in Singapore. So anyway, something cool, something a little different, and I thought a little bit of connection to the brand. So all right, so wrist checks out of the way. Let's just get into it. Again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so delighted to have you guys on. So before we sort of get into the nitty gritty of the brand, Huiy, Andrew, I would love it if you guys can share a little bit about yourselves, your background and, who you are, what you do, and how you sort of got into watches.
So, I'm Andrew. For all the listeners out there, how's it going? Yeah, disclaimer, I have Tourette's, so I might sound a bit weird on the podcast, like from time to time. You might hear some cookie sound, but yeah, I'll show you everything's fine. Yeah. So a little bit backstory about me. Like I'm a professional photographer. So basically on my off days from RZE, I do like commercial photography mainly and all that. Yeah, and I run an agency with some of my mates here in Adelaide. So that's like my bread and butter. And then on the side, like I have another full-time job, which is RZE Watch. In RZE, I guess like whenever people ask me what's my role, it's like, yeah, there's so many things that we do because like we are just a company of like multi-talented people, and we just try to do everything at once and all that. Yeah, so if there's a proper title to me, then I would just I'll normally just tell people that I'm like the community like manager and all that. I mainly run the socials. So if you're in RZ, like so if you go to the IG page for RZ Watches, I'm the one that's replying for all the DMs most of the time and all that. Yeah. Unless like there's exceptional cases, you might see Huiy sometimes, but it's like once in blue moon and all that. But yeah, so that's my main job in RZA at the moment. And yeah, but other times I just like to call myself a watch peddler, which I just go around and just like share the joys and the fun of wearing a RZA watch.
So cool. Yeah, Watch Peddler is a fantastic title. But yes, the community manager is cool as well. So I know who I'm talking to next then when I'm DMing you guys. That sounds fantastic. Cool, cool. That's and yourself, we what how give us your what was it 411? I don't even know if I'm saying that term right. But
Yeah, do people still say 411? Is that a thing that people still use?
no, I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess Andrew downplays his role a bit. I think yeah, he's definitely a community manager and he works with engagement in our community as well as he has done so worked on some other campaigns as well, does some shooting for us as well in Australia and brings a really good international perspective. So as we kind of open the conversation off as being in multiple time zones. We have team members in Singapore, we have team members in Malaysia, in there with Andrew in Australia, myself in Canada, and then we have another team member in Philippines. And so that whole international component really requires an international perspective to marketing, branding, and global identity. We try to get away from the idea of that when someone says like, where is this made? Or where are you guys from? We like to ask people what's important to you, because if you tell us what's important to you, then I can tell you the person in charge or where it comes from, because often watches are one of those things where an individual likes to argue that they believe that a watch is not the sum of its parts, but the person who's asking where is something made is typically asking about the sum of its parts in its individual parts. And for us, it's really actually really important in saying that, like, yeah, there's a transparency aspect to it in terms of, for example, the movement and the fact that the movements may be Japanese movements or they might be Chinese movements or whatever it is may be, we can be transparent with that and then tell you like, well, the cases are manufactured in China, like many cases are manufactured in China. But if you're reducing it to an answer of like, what do I do or what does Andrew do or what is it, where is it made? It's really actually quite dismissive of the rest of the story of the watch, which is what makes the watch the watch, just like what you've mentioned about the Seiko that you're wearing. It ties to Singapore because of what it's where it's made as well as the dial, but it also ties to RZE through the color of the dial, like it nods to the medallion yellow. And it's I appreciate all those things, and that's where watches goes, is that it's the one area where an individual gets to express their individuality with a tool that they have with them all of the time. And although, like many of us might just every day pick up a t-shirt and put it on, there's some people who every day they put on a t-shirt that celebrates their band. Maybe it's the place they work. Maybe it's the school they went to when they were a child. Maybe it's their favorite TV show. It's an opportunity to express your identity. And every time you put on that jersey or something like that, you go out and you're flying a flag for someone. And the thing about watches is that we're so often quick to look at one watch or one brand and be like, oh, they're flying a flag for this, or this is what they mean. Like, they must be a diver. They wear dive watches. No one thinks that ever. That
Yeah.
watch has never touched water. Like, it's just like one of those things where yeah, I don't like to reduce anybody and or reduce the brand or reduce any kind of thing like that. So it's really important as the theme of the show so far has been where everyone's come from or where, you making this happen across all the time zones. And I think that's actually the best story about RZE is that we might have been born in Singapore, but we're trusted by the adventurers around the world to continue the story. And so, yeah, I feel fortunate. I know that that's an aside, but I wanted to make sure we caught it because I know that Andrew sometimes has a difficulty expressing the role, and we do too. Is that we don't necessarily have defined roles for any of us individually because we're so focused on making sure that the company grows and has the image and identity that we want. And that's not just to say like we want it to optically look like a thing, we want it to feel like a thing. And that, it includes people like you, includes people like Matt over at, sorry, Watchpoint there. I think it's important that like all of us have clear transparency around where the stuff comes from, what we're doing, what it means and stuff, because it is more than a watch. It's a lifestyle. So
Yeah.
that's a long way to arriving at the brand as well. And so I'll transition into that if you have nothing to add there.
Yeah, go for it. No, I was just admiring sort of, I mean, you guys sort of have like a, like a collective, mindset to this, right? It's very much like, it's a global effort to try and pull this all in. And it's a very much a collection of your efforts going into this. And it's very evident just from, the 5 or so minutes I've had a chat with Andrew prior to us starting, and also, a couple of minutes with yourself as well. And just this couple of minutes that we've started off. So no, that's all I wanted to add. It's fantastic. So I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, so I guess for my age, I'm unique in the industry in that like I've been a watch collector since I was a child. So I've had an opportunity to be introduced to watches through my father. Yeah, so I've been collecting vintage and involved in kind of buying, selling, and trading since I was a young boy. My parents came as refugees to Canada like in the mid 80s. And so when I was young, I was born here, but we didn't have much. And one of the things that was steady in our lives was my dad had a good understanding of watches, so he brought it from the old country, if they is that's how they say it, I guess. And
Yeah.
he brought this story along with a watch, and I remember when I was young, and he told me this story about a watch that he'd gotten at a refugee camp that was looted by a soldier there, and it was a happened to be a Rado. And he was able to express to me that if you have a little bit of information and a little bit of understanding of value, you can arbitrage that into something that can improve your life circumstances. Because in that refugee camp, there was a moment where that soldier went and asked if anybody was willing to trade that watch for some rice. He'd make that offer, which was several times the value of that watch. But being a Rado and my dad recognizing it, he said, if you take that watch and you can give it to me, I can throw it to the ground, stomp it down into the ground and kick it down the road, and it's scratch resistant. I'll I'll trade you that watch. And yeah, my dad shows me that when I'm like 6 years old. It's like pristine Rado Dia with this legendary story, and he says like, and so because I know this, we're gonna go to the pawn shop and we're gonna go to the flea market and we're gonna go to these things. And because somebody else didn't value this thing,
Mm.
I was able to arbitrage it and I was able to bring it to this country and things like that. And now we have this knowledge that we can do this again and again, find something that people don't understand and find the value in it and communicate it to someone who does have that value. And then that's what Watches is about. So that the interesting thing about that is that following that journey, because we were immigrants and that like even though my dad understood this, we never really owned several watches at a time because we would only appreciate them for the moment, recognize their specs and kind of the beauty of them all, and then they'd have to be gone. And that's actually the thing that taught me about the ability to appreciate things without needing to own them, and that like you don't need to necessarily be a dress watch guy to understand legacy and dress watches from Cartier, or you can appreciate it and love hand wind, but
Sure.
never need to buy it.
Mm.
There's all these things, and so yeah, I think my first love was like a Movado museum watch, and I remember my dad
Nice.
saying like, you can appreciate it, you can look at it, you can then tuck it right back under the couch because like the museum watch will be like that forever.
Mm.
You will find one someday again if you want it and you have the money. But like until then, it's we can appreciate them. And that's like pre-internet or yeah, really pre-internet. And so my watch journey kind of got to follow along. And so I met Travis in like 2023. I was still an educator at that time, so I actually used to be a high school administrator.
Mm.
But I came into it through our creative director, who is Kirk here in Canada, and he wanted me to talk to Travis because being a watch enthusiast all my life, I've known microbrands or independents, and I like followed on a blog to watch the sub homages like it was really interesting because a lot of the beginning of micro brands was sub homages. And
Yeah.
so to see Swiss manufacturing with all of those kind of like, I think so many of them are defunct now, like De Boffre or any of those early interesting sub homages, I guess. Yeah, like I mean, like they're doing things that we like the mill sub and stuff like that on what simple limited knowledge there was on historical stuff that you couldn't access and things like that. But anyways, I followed those journeys, but I never really voted with my dollars with any micro brand through 2020 even. It was never something that I was interested in. And Kirk really found that fascinating working with Travis, and he wanted me to explain to him why, because he felt like there was a point in 2020 of the introduction of RZE where there was a real potential momentum, and like
Mm.
it got into the community and stuff, and Kirk wanted to make sure that that was preserved, and he wanted me to talk to Travis about that, not even with the idea of having a job or having a company or anything like that. But in that conversation, I talked to Travis, and he says, like, why don't you care about this? Like, why don't you believe in me or the micro brands, never mind me, but any of these people? And I said, because it's quite simple. Like every micro brand is just like a little bit Pinocchio, isn't it? Is like
Mm.
it's all just a little bit of scratch the itch until you get the real boy. Like, isn't it just like, like a laundry list of specs because we like start shopping for watches the way that we used to shop for computers, like a little bit like the Pentium 133, 233, like let's upgrade our processor, let's upgrade is that's all it is, isn't it? It's like just like one of those things where people are trying to find the material that they like and things like that. And certainly now, I mean, education has changed and there's more and manufacturing has given us more and all these things like complications, more
Yeah.
modules, more anything. You can get anything, anything. If you have money, you can get anything.
Mm.
But the thing that I wanted Travis to understand was that like if you are on a perpetual chase for spec, you'll always be one step behind because there's always going to be some guy out there disqualifying your purchase. They're like, oh, but if only it was grade five, then I'll really pay. It's like,
Yep.
no, you're lying. It has nothing to do with that. It's because there is a grade five watch out there already,
Yeah.
which is the reason why you know what that means.
Sure.
Yep.
But
Exactly.
but and that whole aspect of it, over the last few years, we've continued to build on that. And I told Travis I was you guys all know now how this story ends, but I compelled Travis at that point. He's like, "Well, what would make you pay?" And at that point, he told me that he had a true super compressor coming. That was at the time, JLC's patent had expired, and I was like, "Yeah, that it isn't Pinocchio because there wasn't a titanium brand that was doing something that was hard coded and stuff like that. It was just too much of a mishmash." And having met him and stuff like that, I was like, "Okay, true super compressor, I'll pay." And then he's like, and now like what do you think about the brand and what do you think? And I said, as like as an educator, I think that a lot of brand identity and a lot of kind of us finding who we are and what we believe in comes from education. We think that education is politically left, but it's actually ideologically left in that knowledge is power and critical thinking is important, and that we should all be able to define ourselves in identity, in branding, in who we believe and what we believe. And we should all have the right to do that. And explaining that to Travis and saying that it's about education for the brand. It's about identity. It's teaching people about the feeling. It's about what we believe in for exploring the outdoors, the leave no trace philosophy that like nothing is possible. We don't have to leave things behind. We don't need to necessarily make any of our products obsolete. People don't need one more watch. They could just participate in the brand and the lifestyle. And that should be enough because the number of people who don't buy watches far exceeds the people who buy watches. And every time you tell people a story that's compelling that they can bring to the dinner table instead of the forum, you're introducing watches to somebody else in an aspirational way. And so that leads us to where I am in the brand. And I see that as people can say that I'm in the lead in marketing or whatever, but I think that brand education and kind of like flying the flag is the most important part of and I also tell people to every other independent brand out there that we're not out here to try to eat your lunch. We're out here to celebrate watches and the lifestyle adventure and that F91W, celebrate. Fair and Sweat, digital, celebrate. Manasseh, celebrate. Like you see somebody
Mhm.
who's wearing a watch that's not an Apple Watch, Garmin, or Amazfit or whatever,
Yeah.
celebrate. Because someone's making a discerning choice. It's not that any of those other watches are to be diminished. Those are lifestyle choices as well. And there's jokes in the industry. It's like you see someone with an Apple Watch, that guy is a doer. You see someone with a luxury watch, that guy makes decisions. Somebody with no watch, they're not doing nothing. And it's one of those things where of course we're stereotyping people and like saying that these people are this way and that's why we have Red Bar where there's rules like no assholes.
Mm.
If we actually believe that to be true, see a watch, celebrate. So, I think that's a long way around my story and the brand and identity, but I think that that's something that is important to who we are and what we believe in because we do want to build a legacy for the brand. And before we transition, I'll say that one thing that I think is stuck in my head for a long time is that you don't buy luxury because of the brand name necessarily. You always buy luxury because of what it represents or what you believe it will represent. And real luxury is actually the ability and free will to make that decision for yourself. If you
Yep.
bought a crowned watch for the
Mm.
sake of the crown, and you didn't decide that for yourself, and it was years of watching television and influencers and things like that that told you that that was the reason why you need that. It's okay. It can be an accomplishment to attain that. And you need to tell yourself that. The AD doesn't need to tell you that. Your friends on the internet don't need to tell you that. And certainly your likes don't need to tell you that. And I think that's critical.
Well said. Well said. I must say, I mean, that's just an amazing crescendo where it started, where it is, and sort of just building the story up. And I think, I mean, this is why I do this. Really putting it down here. One, because I love talking watches and I love talking to people about watches, and two, I love to hear the stories. And this is exactly what it's all about, hearing a story. I mean, I've written down some, as my listeners will know, and people and yourself, I've written down some questions before we start, and there's always just a bit of a steer. There's talk about tough, durable, titanium, adventure. Yes, that's the at the precipice, right? I mean, that's sort of like, that's what you see, but there's so much more to that. So I'm glad you went into that. All right. Now, obviously, you mentioned, the brand sort of been starting at 2020, and yourself, you came in. Was it 2022, 2023 when you both sort of joined around then?
I think I joined a year later, right? Because Huiy was the one that recruited me. I I apologize. I totally skipped my watch story just now because I was just talking about my role, and then halfway through I was like, "Crap! I did not say well, how did I got into watch."
Yeah, how
Let me
did you get into watches? Let me know. Let me know.
we divert. Yeah, yeah. So watches for me, I'm not like I'm a person that I don't really care. I don't really know much about watch like since growing up because I grew up in Malaysia. So back in Malaysia, wearing anything that's like unbranded, it's already a luxury. Like even a fossil watch is luxury.
Mm.
So as far as I can remember, watch was something that was used to commemorate a certain milestone in my family. I remember my first watch was a baby G. I think it's a Casio baby G.
Classic.
The one with the green colored jelly stuff. That was like my dad bought it for me because it was my first year in primary school. That's how I remember. And then along the way, like I got a few pieces of watches that just signify, like graduated, like like year 10 of Survey and all that. And until I got my first paid job, so my first was a fossil trench watch. So yeah, so for me, all this while, like watches has always been something to commemorate the journey and all that, and it links back to a certain memory. Like I'm a very sentiment person, so for me, like this is just one of the ways that I do it. And how they got into like watch all the way, it's because I think it was like when I moved to Australia at 2020. That's when like COVID kind of happened, right? Yeah, late 2020. So I was an aspiring photographer at the time. Previously, I was a brand marketing guy that I had a company in Singapore that worked for like 8 years and stuff. And then when I moved over, I said, I'm gonna start clean and fresh. Like, let's just like do something different because they call it they call it the men's like 30-year-old crisis. Like when you're nearing your 30-year-old, you normally
Yeah.
do something that drastic. It's either you
Yeah.
change
I
or you
started a
just like
podcast, but yeah,
yeah,
go on.
yeah. That's yeah. So yeah, so I started on like doing photography, like with landscape, street, and stuff. But funny enough, because of the lockdown and all that, I wasn't able to do anything. So I was like watching this channel, like Peter McKinnon, where I was looking at photography and stuff. And then I saw like his editor, now our creative director, Kirk, was like posting stuff about like G-Shock. I remember the post was the Casio, the classic triple black GA20 100 1A1. So I saw this like, oh, that's like so nice. Like, do you think I should get it? I just DM him and I said, yeah, you should get it. Like, so I just went and I bought it because he said like it's so hard to find. But I think like the appreciation of G-Shock in Australia, it's a bit weird because I went onto Shields, I walked in, I saw the watch on the shelf, it was 25% off, and there was 5 of them. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. Like it's sold out in Canada, it's sold in US at the time. It's like, oh man, like that's fine. I got a bargain. So I bought it and then I started doing photography for that. And then eventually I posted one photo that landed me social media like gig with G-Shock itself, G-Shock Australia.
Ah,
So
sweet.
what happened was like I think it's blur, but like behind the shelf there, that's like home and have your box that's like for Casio, the Steel series. So that was the contract. Like they gave me all the watches, they pay me, and then I did a ad for them. I sent the ad back to Kirk. I said like, thank you for encouraging me and inspiring me and stuff and all that. It was just that, like, but funny enough, I think a year later I got a message from Huiy and say, hey, like we like your stuff, man. Like are you interested in like like shooting some content for us and all that? And it was when like he sent me the SPRA. Yeah, so that's where like my relationship with RZE started. I like because like of my ignorance about watches, right? Like I just look at it, it's like, oh, this is cool. So I bought a lot of like Seikos, I bought a lot of G-Shocks, Timex, and I've seen RZE float around quite a bit, but because it's a micro brand, I'm just not confident on my skill sets to identify what watch is good for me. So I wasn't able to pull a trigger. So yeah, it was that time when I got sent that watch and I look at it and I'm like, man, like it's different. It's titanium. It's first of its kind that I've seen, like to my entire knowledge of watches. And yeah, we did some content and then we just continue on with like the Resolute series. And eventually Trev and Huey was like, hey, you interested in like just joining the team and working with us? So that was when like I decided, yeah, I like branding stuff. Like brand has been something that I geek and I love because I used to be a brand consultant. So even doing photography, it's always about like tying the relationship of like how do you like cohesively allow people to understand like the product itself, but not by selling to them, but selling aspirational aspect of like making it
Mm,
a lifestyle. And as like Hui mentioned just now, like RZE, the DNA of RZE, it's that like we want to showcase a lifestyle, we want to embody and we need to live out that lifestyle and share that lifestyle of like having watches, having a RZE watch. How does that feel? Not just based on specs or whatsoever, but it's just way more than that. And that's why like I feel like I can jam with the boys. And yeah, we ended up like creating the Urbanist. So it's our very first like solar guaranteed life watch. It was fun to do because we shot the whole thing in Melbourne, and we want to target like we want to target the audience that's like, because RZA is always about adventures, outdoors, and all that. But I would say like 70 to 80% of us lives in the city, lives in urban scape.
mm,
So how do we make like how do we allow people to see that like we just not hard to reach brand and all that? So that's how the Urbanist was like born, just purely because like we believe that everyone and every day is an adventure. Like your commute to work, whatever you do and all that, it's an adventure. Like we don't want to, you know we don't like downplay any sort of things around everyone's life, because for maybe like for me, like let's say now I have a kid, like my best adventure is like me taking the stroller out
yeah.
to get coffee in the morning, and hopefully she behaves and she doesn't cry or she doesn't like poop in the diaper and all that. Yeah, that's an adventure of its own. And so yeah, to that minuscule of adventure, and just to bring that out in the watch and how to represent it, so that people look at our range and all that and they feel like, you know what, like that's a skill that is suitable for me, regardless of what it is and all that. I
Mm.
don't need to be hiking the Himalayas or like diving into like the deepest trench in the world to wear the watch and all that. Like yeah, so yeah, and yeah, fast forward, now I'm here with the crew and all that, and yeah,
It's
that's my story. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for circling back. And I mean, point that's come through with from both of you is that, you guys are it's selling that aspirational, like, that lifestyle, like, you're embodying it. It's just not the specs. And, there are many major brands that fail in that aspect. I'm not going to name them, but selling that aspirational lifestyle, I feel like there's a lot of brands that just don't do that well. They sort of market a watch and you look at it and go, I don't really know who that's targeting, don't really know what that's, meant to sell. That's happened with plenty of brands, but vision is clear and it's coming through, not from just your material that we've seen online, but your watches itself, and obviously what you're telling us today. So cool. Yeah, it's awesome. If you're into microbrand and independent watches, which you clearly are as you're listening to this podcast, you got to check out Watchpoint. Watchpoint is the newest destination in Melbourne, Australia for microbrand and independent watches. But it's more than just a brick and mortar store, it's a hub for watch enthusiasts. Come check out brands such as HZ, Bazel, Second Hour, RZE, and Monbray, and other exciting watches you won't find anywhere else. Watchpoint is also your go-to website for buying said watches, exploring microbrand profiles, discovering new releases, and staying informed with editorials, industry insights, and buying guides. So if you're keen on trying out your favorite microbrand watches, drop into Shop 304, Level 3, the Block Arcade on Collins Street, or visit watchpoint.com.au or check them out on Instagram at watchpoint.au for more.
Thanks. I mean, I appreciate that you mentioned that you guys or other people see it as well from the outside looking in, because I think it's something that everyone in the micro brand or independent watch or budget watch world already knows, is they've seen that ad that's like, how do we do it? How do we get these prices so low? We cut out the middleman. No middleman. Only specs. Only direct to consumer. Bow, bow, bow. Like, I mean, isn't that exactly what you're being sold on all those ads? It's like that's what they're telling you. The reason why it's affordable is because they've cut out all these things. But then you forget that these are the things that make things more than that and not just objects of manufacturing. To be something of value and tangible, there needs to be more than that. And I think that the intangible is what makes the magic. And so if we want to just cut out the middleman and we want to cut out all the things in between, it's going to be easier and easier and easier to go direct from consumer factory, direct to consumer from the factory. And I think that we are already seeing that. There's a plethora of AliExpress brands out there or Temu brands out there, and it's essentially the new version of As Seen on TV. It's like, you know what? Like boomers used to watch like As Seen on TV and like just get fed ads for things that were cheap that have certain specs, and now they're being fed it to them on their Facebook feeds. And no disrespect to anybody of any age group or anything like that, is that it's just historically that's how marketing goes. It's like you cater to a market that has people who happen to have money that's expendable, and maybe they aren't having anyone else tell them that maybe that's a bad idea, grandma. And then you like have to clean it out of their drawer someday. Like that's not what we're trying to achieve, which is why we have taken that outdoors approach or that hard goods approach of like, we'll take a trade-in of any watch of yours that is an RZE one, anytime, any condition, and the amount you get back is consistent. Why? Because if it's sitting in your drawer and you don't think it's worth anything, it's worth something to us. It's worth something to somebody else in the community that wants that watch, and you're stopping them from having it. I think that that's something that is so different from the way that we even try to tell the story versus the way that someone else tries to tell their story, is that the ad is often for somebody else. Can you believe how low we get this price? Like, let me just give it to you for $100 less.
Yeah.
For, and it's like if it was that great and if it was something that meant so much to you, then why is it like something that can just be bought? Isn't the whole point to be a participant, an active participant of that? And so when you order a watch, we say like, your adventure, that's day one starts with us. And if you treat every day like day one, not just in watches, but like Andrew mentioned with the baby or you with the podcast, if we're pushing ourselves every single day, you're going to be able to see and experience growth and find new things, and that kind of opportunity to do that every day and not just, you know, stumble along in life, be driven by other people and like having them decide what success means or what is like the hot brand or things like that. I mean, that's really why we want to do this thing, is we want to celebrate that. Like, yeah, certainly if all of the budgeting that we had now, of course we everybody still spends budgeting, or you'd never see the ads that say, "Oh, look at how cheap it is." Like those are ads too, guys. Let's not be fooled. That's marketing. And so like
Yeah.
if I bundle all the money I've ever spent on marketing, I probably could have paid a celebrity by now. But the one thing that I believe is that like it's not David Beckham that's selling Tudor. It's Tudor that's selling Tudor, and it's like a bunch of people who are looking at David Beckham and Lady Gaga and these influencers, and they're real influencers. They're not, and not to say that watch influencers are not influencers, but you guys know what I mean. Is that like influencers of that magnitude for the mass market? It's entirely aspirational. It's like Nick Jonas at Fossil. Why do you pick Nick Jonas for Fossil? Because of the age group, because of the audience, because of the people who looked up to Nick Jonas now are at that point in their watch journey.
Yep.
And that's something that we look at for David Beckham, is that maybe if you watched him score a lot of goals when he was younger and you liked the Spice Girls, you might have a little bit of money in your pocket, and like the Rolex AD list doesn't sound that appealing. So like David Beckham, like
Mm.
even if I pick someone that is famous, I wouldn't even know where to start based on our community, because there's such a great community of people, from microbrand enthusiasts to actual outdoor adventurers that are looking at us from the standpoint of, extreme sports. Like, how do you find someone who's going to gravitate, like, identify with all those people? And that's why, if you look at our website with RZE adventurers that are featured, there's, Kurt, who's going to be, he's a junior blacksmith now, but he's going to be a master blacksmith, I think, in a couple of years. And he's going to be one of, a handful in America, not more than a handful now. But I mean, there's other people out there that are, championship formation skydivers and things like that. It's because there's things that people have put time and work and effort into becoming great at it because they're demonstrating that anybody can be great at it. They're not exceptional in that they're exceptional because of what they do. They're exceptional because of what they've overcome and what they've endured to
Mm.
be in the place that they're in today. It's not because of just talent. It's the 4 a.m.s, it's the 6 a.m.s, it's every single day that they're on that adventure, the blood, sweat, and tears that put them in that place to have an opportunity to succeed. It's all of the failures up until that point. And celebrating that is not David Beckham.
Mm.
It's everyone. And we're gonna move into that, like, aspect, like Andrew mentioned. We want to be able to feature people who are walking their babies and their prams down the street, like, the urbanists having that urban identity of celebrating that everyday adventurer and stuff, is recognizing that, whatever struggle, whatever it is, man, just like pulling it off every single day, people should be proud of themselves and we should be able to celebrate that. I think it's tougher and tougher, especially with like mental health and feeling alone and like isolated. How do we find joy in the day to day is through each other and through community. And I think one of the most important things is that whether it be a sticker or an Instagram post or whatever, we welcome you openly. And that's why it's important to have someone like Andrew be a community manager that understands the brand, that can welcome people to the brand and have people like you as well, like with podcasts, so that people can get to know us and what we stand for, because we hope to be here as long as the trees that we plant will be here, as long as the titanium will be here, as long as the washes will be running, as long as the warranties will be. Is like we want this thing to be something that can be passed on. And that's why we make promises with the brand, is because those promises can't be broken by the next generation when we say it's forever. It's like everybody wants to talk about how sustainable, their company is and stuff like that. It's like we do it from top to bottom, and that's important to us. But no one is taking stainless steel and titanium and throwing it in a garbage and like,
Yeah.
it's not suddenly going to disintegrate. So we also all have to acknowledge that if something is going to be here forever, it's not a t-shirt. It's not going to get washed and then donated and slowly fall apart to threads and be thrown away. We know from history that you will find watches from, the wars and things like that. And based on the direction of the world, God forbid anything crazy happen, all of your safe queens that are sitting in safe somewhere in the world, guys, don't worry, they'll look like that forever.
Mm.
You-
Oh, mate, well said. And I just want to sort of circle back to your re-verified program. I mean, that's something that sort of you touched on quickly, but I sort of want to go back to that point so our listeners can really understand this. I mean, this is you guys saying, hey, you can, if you're done with your watch, or you feel like you're not quite, when you watch, but you want to send it back to us, we'll take it back. We're gonna take it back. We're gonna get the most use out of it. So, and that's fantastic. I mean, I don't think I've really heard of any other brand doing something like this, let alone, I guess an independent brand. So yeah, it's incredible. And obviously you then test it, clean it up, and get it back out there for another collector to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's funny when you're like, I don't know of any other brand who does it. It's like, yeah, I mean, Patagonia,
Yeah, I was talking more
Carhartt.
about watches,
No,
not
no,
so much
I know
clothing,
where,
but yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. But and that's why it's crazy, because when we talked about it within our brand, we're like, clothing like falls apart. It's funny that, I'm glad you circled it back to it, because we just finished this part that we were talking about, and it's like clothing falls apart and they can do it. They can grade it and tell you, well, I'll give you this much for a Canada Goose, or I'll give you this much for Carhartt, or I'll give you like And when we looked at the watches, we thought to ourselves, yeah, we could grade it. We could do these things like, look at the Japanese pre-owned market and break it
Mm.
down to the listing of like these are the boxes we check. Yeah, sure, we could do that. Or we could just understand that it's a hard good, like, there's a set value of the movement and things like that. And we know what it costs to service a watch because that's within our wheelhouse. Just like you said, it's like, well, do you guys clean it up and test it? It's like, well, we have watchmakers, guys. It's not you, but I mean, like the world of watches, even when people are like, well, I'm not sure if there's going to be any value in that because, I just don't like service is an unknown. It's like, well, guys, the internet is very clear these days. Like,
Yeah.
if it is in at a 28, 24, if it's a NH35, it's like it's kind of a known quantity, guys. You know what service is worth. If you want to fiddle with it yourself or put in something stock that's not regulated, like a little bit of internet's going to tell you this is what it's going to cost to service that. It's
Exactly.
pretty, and so like I'm not, and again, I know that some of this is a little bit cheeky, but I want people like they're none of these are secrets. Everybody knows these things. They don't like hearing them all the time, but it's true. And so that's why we can do the re-verified program. That's why we can give you 40% of the value and then say like we're gonna sell them all at 70 for pre-owned. No, we're not gonna sit down and take pictures of everything to show you on our scratch resistant coating where there might have been a flea bite because these watches aren't supposed to stay pristine. You want a safe clean, buy one of those.
Mm,
It's not, I'm not worried about it. Not fuss, mate. Just do your thing. Like it's just,
Yeah.
like
correct.
yeah, and so that aspect of it is just really
Mm,
what we look at in terms of re-verified program of recognizing there's going to be people out there who don't care, they want the discount and they are looking for an older piece, they're going to beat it and they're also thinking about it that when I'm done with it, I don't need to service it. I'll send it back to you guys and you guys do it again. Like there's so many people that are in the mainstream that we're finding taking us up on this offer because they're looking at it like the way that you or me might be growing out of hobbies. They're growing out of watches in different ways, and that like they might have ventured in on the Urbanist with the solar movement and then thought to themselves like, oh, actually, like I do want something that is a dive watch and I'll give that a go. And they're just investing in the brand in that way that they're just throwing a few extra $100 to keep our lights on so that they can have something else and that watch can go to some kid who's entering the brand that's paying for their first quality watch. It's the reason why we do it. And it's the reason why I think it makes it easier to also be sustainable when we look at it from a product circularity standpoint. Why waste?
Mm.
Like, why not waste not? Like, there's like, you don't need to just be having our products sit on shelves, even for us. Like, we don't need them to sit at the office. We need to make the amount that the market wants, sell those ones, convince people that the brand will be here and will gradually grow at that rate. There's a lot of people that say, like, why don't we run this SKU again? Why don't we make this watch again? It's like, because let's be honest, guys, is like the world of watch enthusiasm and paying customers is much, much smaller than what people perceive it to
mm,
be. And it's like you don't need to be consuming and buying and stuff all of the time. We can just be celebrating what we already have. It's one of the things that I think I struggle with myself as a collector is that how do any of these brands move forward and stuff like that if we aren't more honest with how many pieces there are and I feel guilt and I think Andrew's a parent and I don't know about you but I think what happens if my son doesn't care about this stuff? How do I make him care or how do I make someone else care so that
mm, mm,
these things will not be wasted and it's not from a
mm,
finance thing or a money thing is that who will then tell these stories of what makes the flat Jedi Omega that I have important? Like who's gonna compel them to Google that or to ChatGPT it or whatever? I think that's a real difficulty. And I think that that's part of the reason for the re-verified program is that we're constantly trying to find ways to tell stories that make it significant to people so that we can be giving them value instead of just taking and taking your money and
Mm.
and turning it into something else. I want to be able to give you something.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. It's such a, yeah. The first thing when you said that was, yeah, Patagonia. But yes, I love how it'll come back around. So yes, that's awesome. That's such a fantastic part of your brand, and I'm glad we got to speak about that in detail. And I hope the audience can understand that and understand how special that is, I think. All right. Now, let's talk about your watches, right? A little bit about your watches. We talked about the brand, the story behind it, and everything else. We did talk a little bit about the Urbanist as well. I myself, I think I told you guys this when in the lead up to this podcast. I used to have the Valor 38 in the medallion yellow. I think was it called the medallion yellow when it was first released? I can't remember. It was medallion. Yeah, that's right. And till this day is one of the best yellow dials that I've had. Obviously, got another yellow dial on my wrist too, and absolutely love that. The coding on the watch. I remember first showing my mate. We actually both of us we both bought the same watch. He bought it in white and I bought it in yellow. He's still got his and he's not much of a watch guy, and he's exactly what you said. He bought it and he wears it every single day and he loves it and he still wears it till this day and he's had it for I don't know how long's the Valor 38 been out for now.
Since
Years.
2022, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly. So since 2022, he's got it and he loves it. So anyway, we're yapping on about it. But UltraHex coding, you know, it's one of those things that, we hear a lot about scratch resistance and, hardness coatings and the like, and you hear less about it in call it the more mainstream brands. You probably hear more about it in the enthusiast circles. That's just my, sort of experience anyway. I hear a lot about it more in the micro brands, the independent brands, using this sort of as a spec. But you guys have done it with titanium, and that's really cool. It's not something that I've seen. We normally see it with steel, and I guess maybe my listeners and including myself, I don't really know a lot about this coding and what makes it so special. So yeah, I'd appreciate if you guys can give me a bit of knowledge on this.
Yeah, I can come in and explain. I guess in 2020, when Travis founded RZE, he'd previously been in the watch industry and being a watch enthusiast for some time as well. Obviously inspired by Zinn and all these other coatings and all these steel brands like Traska was developing one at the time, things like that. And so Travis being coming from an engineering background, watch enthusiast, and things like that as well, and happening to be in the industry already, he was starting to approach people and talk to them about titanium because of his love for the material. And he's now a commercial airline pilot, so that gives you kind of the trajectory of his career. But his love for titanium also was kind of coupled with a bit of a, I guess, disappointment in the weakness in titanium, being that it corrodes, it gets that that coating outside. It's very prone to scratches, especially back then. It wasn't common. Like if you guys think back to old iMac titaniums and stuff, that was pretty common. There was other brands. Like my first titanium watch was a Canadian brand, Momentum, and they look nice when they come out. When they scratch, they're just totally scratch magnets. And so at the time, Travis was talking to manufacturers and stuff about developing UltraHex, and so we were able to trademark it. We were among the first to do a titanium, and his whole thing was turn strength into weakness into strength. So that we were able to get that lightweight titanium and that finish it well and then preserve that finish or bead blast it and make something look good like that for a long time. And so the challenge, of course, there is the tolerances of watchmaking. Even a coating is going to make a difference. And that was one of the things where he invested early on in working with titanium, working with the factories to kind of perfect it so that all of our bead blast watches kind of look like that forever. It is, there is other coatings in the industry like Dia Shield or higher end super titanium. There's different options out there like what Traska uses and things like that or now more and more, but it is essentially coatings that are like DLC or color DLC and things like that, but it's about the application, just like Cerakote or tint or
Mhm.
anything else in any industry. You're looking at a post-production post-production process that has flaws and has errors and margins of error. And I think that with anything like that, there's going to be a cost involved. And not to say that, I guess, the reason why it's not used more often is because it's expensive. It's a process that only certain numbers of customers or users will ever experience the benefit of. And so that's why it's become an integral part of our brand. But unless you're telling people about it and you're pushing it or you're representing what that means, that spec becomes insignificant. And, what we say in our brand, there's a tagline I like to say is that, like, deep divers and desk divers welcome. Is that, like, no matter what, it's you're gonna get scratches if you wear it, even if you're a desk driver, right? And one thing about this coating is that you won't. And it's challenging because this is a spec, 1200 hardness Vickers. It's quote unquote 8 times harder than stainless steel. But then you start getting into this thing of like, well, what kind of stainless steel? Like, which number? Like, is it 316L? Is it 904? Like, like we start to go like deep into that. But then there's the fact that a lot of people will say to us like grade 2 titanium. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean though? What does that really mean? And what, like, the finishing, like, so you want us to pay more to machine it, and then you'll be satisfied because we spent more on that part because we also coat it, and that's more expensive than all the raw material of titanium itself, the labor, and what part of it is important to you? Is the number of titanium really important? Because, like, let's say that it is, and it is harder, but at the substrate level or on the surface level of that, which is really what you're knocking against the table or whatever, it's not
Not gonna make a
significantly
difference.
harder. It makes zero difference. Like, if you are sending your arm through a wall at the rate that will make a difference between 2 and 5, bro, you got other issues. Like, I can technically like, if NASA can drop titanium through the atmosphere, I'm think you're good, bro. That's grade two too, man. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Anyways, the coding, I think, like, going back to the coding,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that, like, we want things to last like for as long or as close to forever as we can, and the corrosion, the basic things that people feel are niggles when when their watches get beat up and stuff, that's what's going to be preserved. And so when we re-verify them and stuff like that, yeah, for the most part the cases look pretty good. They're
Yeah.
almost pristine, and people can beat them up and stuff like that, and that's aesthetically really great. That has been a strong, I guess, USP for our brand for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was my experience, for the time that I owned the Val 38, it was still as clean as the day I got it from the day I had it off to another mate of mine. So, I think, you made a really good point about greater titaniums and specs and all that. But where you always want to be, yes, you want to give the best materials. You want to do whatever you can, but at the end of the day, you want it to be fit for purpose as well, right? You want to be able to give the best you can give, but also not just being high spec for the sake of being high spec.
It's not always just about papers, right? Because I feel like the standardization of how stress test is for a lot of stuff. Let's say like the new iPhone that just launched and all that. Everyone's gonna be like, oh, how durable the glass is, how much can it bend and all that. It's like, mate, like, if we're using it on everyday purpose just as it intended to be, and also like for our watches, which is used by like first responders, people that's they're serving in military, people that's like doing professional stuff like Kirk, which is like like a smith and all that, like goes through like high heat temperature all the time. They are the adventurers that like represent the watch, and they still do wrist check on the watches, looks pristine. As a normal person, like even like me, like as a photographer that just goes out and all that, that's fine, man. It's good enough, man. Yeah. I would any harder, I worry that the watch would scratch my car instead of the other way around and all that, man. That paint job would cost more than just buying a new watch or whatsoever.
Well said, well said. Yeah, you're right. You got the adventurers, you got the people, the everyday adventurers doing this, showing this. that's it, folks. That's part one over. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Part two will be released imminently, so you can enjoy part one and part two, hopefully consecutively. Well, with nothing else, we'll leave it right there. Cheers. Thank you for listening to Overtime the Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. You can find us on our Instagram at Overtime the Podcast, at Kinda Average Watches, or flick me an email on overtimethepod@gmail.com. I appreciate your support and value your feedback. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics that you would like the podcast to cover in the future, please hit us up. Until next time.